7 a.m., October 31st. Happy Halloween. We'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please. Here.
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 Here. Here. Here.
We have a quorum. First item under discussion items is library surplus equipment. I'll call on our library director, Ms. Aaron Smith. Thank you, Aaron.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Just here in front of you this morning, looking for a recommendation to declare the existing shelving, furniture, and equipment for the public library as surplus. The budget for the project does include new shelving, furniture, and equipment. And so the surplus shelving, furniture, and equipment will be repurposed within other city departments or sold in a online public auction. So just looking for that action this morning, or well, not this morning, but for the council meeting. And any proceeds from that online public auction will go to the library capital fund.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions from the committee to Aaron? If not, do we have a motion to bring that to the council?
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Second. Thank you, Darren. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Consent agenda?
Yeah, I believe so. Guy, do you want to go ahead, or do you want to? Yeah. Next item is tree waste discussion with our Public Works Director, Guy Taylor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I did have a video to show you if we get it going, but we don't need it necessarily. Discussion on tree waste.
They can watch it on their own.
Yeah, I can send you the link. We've had an ongoing issue with how to get rid of our tree waste for years. We thought we had a solution with a 2-year contract with a grinder, a contract grinder. He went out of the business, so we were left with trying to figure out what to do with our tree waste. So I was doing some research, found this air burner technology. It's basically a roll-off box with a induction fan on one end of it. It's powered by a diesel engine, that induction fan. And you can feed the tree waste into this container. This particular model that I'm looking at, you can feed it 3 to 5 tons an hour. So in describing the pile of wood that we've got out there, I don't know if any of you have seen it lately, it's enormous. I described it to a contractor that I talked to who owns a couple of these, and he said, well, with that pile that you've got there, what you've described, I think you'll go through that with the burner in 3 to 4 weeks. So we'll be able to burn it using our own staff, our own equipment, and the ash we will keep on site, just mixing it in with the compost, and then we just deliver that, or we disperse it to the residents. We allow them to come and get it. We don't deliver it. So it looks to me like it'd be a long-term solution to a problem that we've had for many years. The air burners that are out there, there's some that are 15 years old still in operation. So for the contract price that we've been paying the contract grinder, we'll cover that cost within a little over 2 years with the price of this purchase of the air burner. The price is $126,829, and what I handed out to you this morning with the highlighted areas, we learned yesterday that it is a taxable item. Minnesota statute does not exempt that piece of equipment from taxing, so there'll be $8,719.49 of tax on there, bringing it to a purchase of $135,548.49, which would come either from the equipment fund or the refuse fund. We're not sure on where the funding source will be yet, but we've got the funding for it.
And I can explain that just a little bit more. You know, if it comes from the equipment fund, you reimburse that fund from the refuse fund. So the source will ultimately be the refuse fund. It's just the mechanics I'm working through a bit. But certainly from the tree waste fee that we're charging on the utilities, we'll cover this. So.
Guy, so does this change any of the recent policies as far as us accepting tree, because we've changed recently tree waste from outside the city limits, correct?
Yes, and that would change that. We wouldn't have to restrict that, so this actually would give us the opportunity to look at other means of revenue too.
Brent, did I see your hand up, or was it Justin? No, everyone good? Any other
Okay.
questions? Anthony?
But, Guy, obviously they offer training on this. Are we gonna take them up on the training? I know it's an additional cost, but,
Yes, we will.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be imperative that we have factory reps train the staff on the correct use of it.
Yep.
So just to repeat, you said that the current rate that we're paying to dispose of it, within 2 years, you'd be able to pay for this unit?
A little over 2 years, yeah.
It'd probably be a little more than that, because you have the operating cost
Sure.
of this too.
Sure.
So, but
Yeah.
it's certainly gonna be.
The
probably
purchase
a-
price
yeah.
would be covered, yeah.
The purchase price would be paid back.
Sure. Sure. All right.
And
any
the
other-
MPCA is good with it. I've done all that checking, and just to...
For now.
Good point. The technology is such that there's a little puff of smoke when the wood is introduced into the container, but other than that, it burns so hot and clean that there's not much smoke.
Scott?
I'll offer it, I just want to, I'll make for a second on discussion.
I'll second it, Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin. Go ahead, Scott.
Me and Guy were talking about this for about a month, and you guys watch that video, it's pretty interesting, there's a few of them on YouTube, I think there is, and then there's a couple on their site, and it's a clear ticket, I think it's a good thing, so.
So I suppose this would mean then we won't have wood chips anymore.
Yeah, it would, for the most part. We do still do some wood chipping of our own.
Right.
But it wouldn't be the
The
enormous
massive pile of wood
right.
chips that we have.
Right.
Yeah, but so, and do we get rid of the compost?
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
do.
right,
Yep.
So the compost is more readily moved than the chips.
Yes, yeah, that compost is highly sought after by the residents.
Yeah.
And it'll just be enriched now with the ash.
Yeah. That's good.
Thank you, Guy. We have a motion and a second, so all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, that motion carries. Consent agenda as well.
Yeah.
Scott?
But,
Consent agenda?
oh, by all means, yeah.
Oh, we got a video.
Item 3 is a College Way project update. Our city engineer, Mr. Brian Navarro. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, good morning, Mayor, members of the council.
Morning.
Just wanted to give you an update on Public Improvement 5312, the College Way Street Improvement Project located in College Way from Western to Tower Road. Update on this is due to the weather that we've already experienced this fall, Interstate Engineering, the contractor, and I have agreed to move this project till the spring. Ultimately, this decision was based on the risk of having a project left partially completed over the winter in the event that weather should happen to change after the contractor has started. This risk of partially completed the project over the winter does not surpass the inconvenience that the traveling public and adjacent local businesses could possibly experience with a project that's lasting longer than generally should under normal seasonal conditions. So at this time, we're anticipating the work to begin as soon as road restrictions end this spring, which is generally late May. And we anticipate having this project completed generally around June 15th. So we'll be memorializing this in a change order and everything. So just wanted to give you an update on this project right now. Also, if I can add too, we just completed those 3 rail surface crossings located at Freiburg, Broadway, and Mill Street. They were completed last Friday. I understand it was kind of an inconvenience to the public and everything, having all 3 closures at one time. However, this was necessary to expedite it for the railroad and their work processes. So I appreciate people's patience on that, but right now they're completed at this time. We got some final cleanup work. So answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions from the committee?
And they're very nice driving over. I
Okay.
drive over them frequent, they're much better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is the fire department extrication tool purchase, and I'll call on our fire chief, Mr. Ryan Muckow. Morning, chief.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I stand for you today, just looking for a recommendation from the council for us to utilize $10,000 from the fire department trust fund to go towards the purchase of a new e-hydraulic spreader and cutter for auto extrication or industrial extrication equipment that we've been looking to purchase. Just a few background points on it is the Fire Department Trust Advisory Count members met, which is Councilmember Fish, Association President Dean Anderson, and then myself. We met last week. Went over kind of the purchase, looked at the equipment, And then also our members had done a tool demo approximately a year ago. And we had 3 different vendors that came to Fergus, and each vendor had a car that we were able to go through and cut apart, tear apart with this equipment. And we did find a tool that was a pretty good match for our purpose. The current tools we have are from 2005, and while granted they do work, interestingly enough, there are metals on vehicles now that are stronger now than they were in 2005, which is contrary to a lot of people's belief. But the cage around the vehicle is well constructed. It's the periphery parts that just completely disintegrate upon impact. So we do have some troubles with our cutter getting through some of the modern vehicles. So this would definitely enhance that operation. And a little difference with these tools compared to the previous ones is they're still hydraulic based, however they're battery operated. So we put on a 28-volt Milwaukee battery, and it's all one unit, so the firefighters can grab it off the truck and head towards the area that needs work. So we're not limited by the length of a hydraulic hose, and we don't have a power operated hydraulic pump anymore. So the current set that we do have, we do still plan to keep and maintain. We're just going to shift it over to another truck, so we'll have basically 2 vehicles set up to respond. One to the same incident, or 2 if we do have multiple crashes at the same time. So it does enhance our service that way, and it gets us into some new technology. So with that, again, looking for the recommendation of the $10,000 from the trust fund, and then the remaining funds, the total price is about $19,000, and then the other remaining will come from the fire department equipment capital fund. I think it's just one other quick side note is $5,000 of it we received about a year and a half ago from Quality Circuits, and I did talk to Wayne Dirkman yesterday and just made sure he was okay with us mentioning it, but they've been very generous to us as a fire department in recent years. So we've gotten a rescue boat and thermal imaging cameras, and when I made reference we were looking at extrication equipment coming before you, he was pretty excited about the money going towards that. So yeah, if there's any questions?
Any questions? Chief Muckow?
I'll make that recommendation, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony. Brent? Thank you, Brent. All in favor of that motion to bring this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
That's all the regular agenda items. I know Andrew Bremseth has one update that he'd like to mention.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Members, related to the meeting on Monday night, the council directed staff to seek an extension from the development group. And I got word late in the evening last night that they are agreeable to an extension not to go beyond December 28th, so just about 60 days. And that December 28th date is the date that the preliminary plat would expire as well. That's where that date came from. So now both the variance request and the preliminary plat would be on a similar timeline once again. And based on that conversation on Monday night, the variance request will go back to the Board of Zoning, and the preliminary plat will make its way back to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any other items coming before the council?
Your Honor, one item I'd just like to bring up is that I'd kind of like an update on Forward Fergus Falls, if we could, for kind of maybe the council meeting. Because there's kind of an item that when you go onto the city's website, you follow the link to economic development, it comes up Fergus Falls business, and I think we need to clarify where Forward Fergus Falls sits. I know obviously it's being funded by some blending grants, but I think as well we also need, the city basically has endorsed Greater Fergus Falls and as being the economic, and I think we should kind of talk about, are we going to put a link on the city website, economic development, to Greater Fergus Falls, or are we going to set up a different division of Forward Fergus Falls business? But I think that's kind of confusing, and I think it's against what the council was, advocating, that we should have one entity for business development.
Mayor, I can add some comment to that at this point. We are currently working with Natalia Bauman at Greater Fergus Falls to make sure the cross links work between the two organizations. Ryan Miller and Lynn as well have been trying to simplify those so it is clear where people would go to. The Forward Fergus Falls business tag it doesn't relate to Forward Fergus Falls' work per se. It was created through that work that we did in 2018 and was replaced with the EIC logo. So it was just a logo. There isn't work that Forward Fergus Falls is doing around that. It was just a visual representation that we had developed through that work with H2M and kind of the elevation of the visual of Fergus Falls. So we're in the process of that. We'd be happy to show you the revamped pages once they're put
Right.
together.
Yeah, 'cause I just want to get to the single entity that we kind of talked about rather than.
Right, and the
obviously
two
confusing
websites
people.
will interact because
Yep.
we host the information on the specific resources like the loan funds, et cetera, which are linked from Greater Fergus Falls back to the city currently.
Yep.
And so we want to make sure that those links remain active, that we don't break, a connection. So we'll take a little bit of coordination, and we're in process right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe we could, maybe it'd be good to just,
I
when we're ready,
think,
just
I
show
think
the
we
websites.
I think we should talk about Forward Fergus Falls a little bit, because it isn't a city kind of, designated entity, I don't believe. So, most of the things the task force and city staff put time into it, so I think that's something we should just, talk about at some point.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else to come before the committee? If not, we're adjourned.
October 26th Port Authority meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from October 10th, 2018. Any question on those? Thanks, Scott. We got a second? Second. Okay. Any questions or discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Item number 2 is the dairy acquisition, and the first thing, authorization for appraisal services for Shanahan Company, and the second thing is financial sources and uses update. Amy.
Great, thank you, President Arneson, Commissioners. Before you this morning is 2 items. We just wanted to, second item being providing an update on the sources and uses related to the project, and Bill Sommore included a memo and an overview of that within the packet, but we'll walk through that after we discuss the request for authorization to secure appraisal services with Shanahan Company for the dairy property. Included in the packet was 2 proposals. Just to note, those will be updated to the Port Authority to be the contract holder with those agreements. For the proposal itself, we didn't ask them to update that until we had that authorization, just to save that step in case it wouldn't move forward. But included is a full parcel, the 29 approximate acres appraisal. This was contemplated in the initial purchase agreement and had been started some time ago when we were initially working on the LCCMR funding. And as well then a second proposal that looks just at the 11.2 acres or 11.4 approximate acres that would be what the city would intend to purchase from the Port Authority. So looking to obtain both of those pieces of information. Steve Erickson from the committee on the project is here as well and could answer any additional questions on this request.
Thanks, Amy. Any questions for either Amy or Steve?
I'd like to hear from Steve if he has any comments on this. Good. Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Well, let me give you a little background on this. Why are we doing this? Originally, the first purchase agreement was signed in June of 2016. And prior to that, the LCCMR application was made in, I believe, late 2015. In November of 2015, there was, the same company was retained by the city to do an analysis of the value of the property, not just for the entire parcel, but also for the LCCMR portion. And that was done to try to make sure that the amount of land being applied that was going to be in the packet for LCCMR would appraise out at the anticipated $1 million. We didn't want to make that information public during the negotiations with Mr. Cheney, so what was contracted for, and what was anticipated, was that there would be an oral report prepared with a memo in their file. The oral report was based on all of the information on the site and comparables and site visits and so forth. But an actual appraisal was not done at that time. The assumption was that we would move towards a closing at some point and then complete the appraisal. Well, that sometime is now about 3 years later, so here we are again, and a couple things have changed. The size and location of the LCCMR parcel, the size has been reduced from 16.6 acres to 11.4, giving roughly 5 acres of additional land for redevelopment in the back portion. So we want to make sure a couple things. One, that the 11.4 acres is sufficient in size to appraise at the $1 million. That allows the $600,000 grant from LCCMR. What needs to take place in order to have the redevelopment parcel and the LCCMR parcel is a combination of the 4 existing pieces into one, and then a subdivision into 2. So when you do the subdivision, you want to make sure you've got the right size and that values out. So we want to do that at this point. The other thing that's important was from the original purchase agreement that eventually was terminated, and through this current one, there's a provision in it that requires the city to complete the appraisal and give a copy to the seller. When we updated when we did the last amendment and we negotiated the price from $1 million to $175,000, one of the other requirements that Mr. Cheney had, which was also voted on by the port, was that that appraisal would be completed and a copy given to him. So that's the other reason to do this. The anticipated cost to do this is that there will be an appraisal completed, which was not done before, of the entire 29 acres. Then there'll be an oral report like the last one, so we're not paying for all of the detailed background work until we actually need that portion. So the appraisal of the entire site is estimated at $13,500. If it's less than that, well, time-wise, it'll be less than that. The oral portion for the LCCMR part is estimated at $16,000. That's roughly about how much was paid the first time 3 years ago when this was done. The other thing I think that's important is that the data that they did is now 3 years old. They are required by their USPAP, Universal Standard Professional Appraisal Practices, is to revisit the site and to go out and attempt to locate additional comparables. If they can't, they'll use both the old comparables and whatever new ones are, but the more accurate appraisals will be from more current comps. So that's why the full appraisal price is maybe a little higher than what we'd like to see it, but it's still less than what it was the first time. Are there any questions?
Just a comment, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I think it's amazing that the lack of sometimes, information that we can really get to the public versus what we know as a council, and I just wanted to reiterate here a couple things. We should note that with this property and with Hoot Lake's closing, that it is the only truly viable property that we can develop in the near term that will produce anything of the size we need to offset the closure of the Hoot Lake plant, that tax base there, that revenue. So this can produce $150,000 to $200,000 a year, which would take off the burden from the taxpayers in Fergus on fixed incomes and offset most of the Hoot Lake loss when that's developed. That's number one. The second thing, the cost of this land went from $1 million down to $175,000. Third thing is we got $100,000 extra in the grant that we had applied for. So instead of a 50-50 split, we got a 60-40. So we got another $100,000 at the outset of this thing. The fourth thing is that we have now realized that the land is already increasing in value. If you compare what the Herzogs can sell the land for that they're not going to use on that development that we have now changed on the Tower Road, with the price that was originally estimated by the county in the purchase, you'll see a great increase in value, which is consistent with what happens when you develop trails, river trails, et cetera, in your city. The sixth thing is that when you look at the land along the river, that the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails in 2017 now designated that property, our trail that we scoped out, that we've laid out through the dairy, they designate that as a state trail system, which means Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails is committed to funding this and getting it done. This is how it works. I'm sitting on the district committee, I'm on a state committee. So we are past the point of will they fund it? We are at the point of they will fund it. And it's usually a 1 to 3 year time frame, and they do it in pieces. Much of the public, many of the public don't know we have another $400,000 grant right now in process with Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails for Union Avenue through the dairy down to Barefoot Park. And the next step would be to go through M State and the new wildland there up and connect to the Kirkbride. And so we could eventually have almost a full loop in Fergus of a biking, walking, ADA accessible trail, all paid for by state funds. All paid for by state funds, I'll reiterate that. Another thing I think we should remember is that the regional significance of this should be looked at in the future. The shift in the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails emphases have been to regional parks. Now, Douglas County has a park department in their county, okay? And so does Becker. We have our park and trails underneath our road and highways kind of, department in our county. But the expansion in Becker County, Detroit Mountain, and around Alec, Brophy Park, $10 million projects at least, that are attracting people like mountain biking, et cetera, should not be overlooked by Fergus Falls, because this property it's unparalleled to have 29 acres right in your city that you can develop. And with the water there and the new emphasis in the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails funding, we could be looking at another round of funding possibilities if we use that water, et cetera, for a regional park. So this becomes not just a one-off thing, but a growing part of a trend which allows state money to come in and new state funding, as well as the economic development I mentioned by the increase in value by putting a trail through the property. So every delay that we do, to me, costs taxpayers money. It's selling our future out because we have no other thing that would offset Otter Tail Power potentially in the same way as this development. So I just want to, again, speak the facts clearly so people know, because I don't think these have been truly put out there. And I think that's part of the beauty of you see this project developing, and there's great potential there, along with the new brewery that's coming in along there. So that's a business, a business venture that will add value to it. So thanks, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments?
I just want to, Rod, when will we see these, you just mentioned all this stuff, when will we see that so we can understand where it all comes from? And, I know you talked about 150 to 200,000 increase in the property. I'd like to know or the property taxes, I'd like to know where you got those numbers from. And then, us buying that property and then having the LCMR money, we're taking all the waterfront is going into that park part. Nothing, no waterfront property will be left. Is that not true? I may be wrong. The 11 acres will be all waterfront acreage, so the most expensive part will be going to the park.
Actually, if I could just, briefly.
Or just give me the information.
But that last comment, I just wanted to clarify it, that instead of being gone as waterfront, it's now going to be all public access. Right now, there's no public access to that 29 acres on the river. And that'll allow public access.
I understand that,
And it
Rob. I'm just saying-
allows
I'm just- what I'm
canoeing,
saying is I'd like
kayaking
to
access and other things which we don't have.
I'd like
So
to see
that's
the map
point.
of where the most expensive part of that property is going away for us for tax. We can't tax that, but the back part is I want to know where the numbers are going to come for that, where that back piece is going to come and how it generates that much money. That's what that's all I want
And I
to
think
see.
Steve is able to answer that.
Actually,
Scott?
I
Yeah.
went through that at one of the meetings some time ago after the purchase agreement was done, but the numbers are based on the River Oaks Landing development. And I met with the county assessor, this is 2 years ago now, I think. But Gordon did a projection of the allowable units that could be put on the property, and at that time, there was going to be 12 acres instead of the 18 that will be under this rendition. And he looked at it from what the zoning would allow for units, and also what a PUD would be allowed for units. Both of those were far in excess of if I just took a proportionate based on the River Oaks Landing. So I used the lower number of, at that time, 60 units. Now with the, and I think you could put, according to Gordon, 209 units on there if it was in accordance with the zoning, and more than that if it was a PUD, but I thought you're looking pretty aggressive if we just start out and say that. So we looked at the cost of the River Oaks units on an average basis for the whole building and what they are going to be taxed at, and applied that with that standard to the dairy site. The River Oaks is less desirable from a market value perspective because the slope of where it is higher. You don't have the same river access. So it, I think it's a pretty good comparable to use. So if we do that and we use the same conservative number of units per acre compared to what River Oaks Landing did, the minimum would be about 92 units on there. 92 units at the tax rate of 2016, I think, or 2017, would generate $131,000 a year to the city. If you put more units on there, of course, the value goes up. Now, what's going to dictate how many units you put there is the quality of the unit, the layout, the design, and so forth. But I think those are pretty conservative numbers to look at. I think it's a very highly desirable piece of property, even with the railroad track there. If you look at your comment about, well, we lose the riverfront, that's actually why we have to do 2 appraisals. We have to look at the diminution.
I realize
value.
that, yeah.
So, but by the time you put your trail system in and the other amenities that are envisioned in the master plan for that parcel, it becomes an attractive component that you're across the street from. So now the value of that land from just losing its river access goes up, and it's likely going to go up to a value of what these other cities have seen for the frontage. So that's the quick explanation.
I just wanted to see the number. You're talking
Yeah,
facts, and I just wanted to see those
Yeah,
facts.
I don't have them with me, but I have.
And I think just send them out to all of us. That's all I'd like to see.
Andrew, you got a comment?
For clarity's sake and transparency's sake, I just wanted to note that on the River Oaks Landing project, we have a tax abatement in place, so the city of Fergus Falls is not collecting to that amount. So just so people are aware that there is a tax abatement that was in place with that development, and that's gonna be how many years ago?
15.
Okay.
Thank you for the,
Just so, I mean, we're not necessarily comparing apples to apples in a sense because we're not collecting what it says on the county's website per se, because we're paying that back as a tax
But
abatement. I just don't want to mislead it.
Right, but we should also then say that the reason there's a tax abatement is to pay for the trail.
The
that goes-
trail was only 5 years of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yep, it was a 10-year abatement, then 5 years added to build that trail.
Okay.
So,
thanks for the update, everybody. That was good information.
Thanks, Steve.
If no other questions, I guess I'm looking for authorization for appraisal services for Shenahan Company for the appraisal.
Chair. I'll move that.
Rod moved that. We got a second? Tom, thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. And Bill, did you want to hit any highlights on the final sources and uses update, or do we kind of just?
Yeah. I'll just give you a high level.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, the items that are in the packet for you are pretty well self-explanatory.
Can you do a video, maybe?
I can't. But if you want to flip to your spreadsheet, I wanted to just, I've been working at getting my arms around this project. You know, Steve Erickson has been working long and hard on this project as well, and so we're putting the financing sources and uses together on this. And we've been working with Minnesota DEED as far as which programs would be available from them. It basically gets down to the revolving loan. That is our best option in discussions with them. But that also looks really well because there's a strong possibility of much of that turning into a grant. So the way I'm looking at it, I'm structuring it in here as a grant, even though it's called a loan at this point. But this is federal EPA dollars that they're using. So this spreadsheet is broke down into these various columns. The first column is what we're talking about right now, is the cleanup, or the purchase and the cleanup of the property. So those uses of funds, those come from Braun. They've updated the estimates of what the various components are going to cost, so that's where we got those numbers, plus costs we've incurred to date. And then you'll notice on the bottom I say additional 2 appraisals, and Steve rightfully pointed out to me, again, we have not completed the first appraisal, so when I'm saying additional, it's in addition to what's above. So it's getting those 2 final appraisals completed. That's, you know, a couple of years down the road when we get the LCCMR parcel sold to the city. That's in there as well. The next column is the LCCMR area, which you've certainly heard, you know, we have that grant application in to do the trail development. And my estimate on cost comes from our engineering department, as do the following 2 columns. Those are the future development of that area, putting streets, water, sewer, storm. You know, that could be 3, 5, 7 years down the road. But I wanted to get my arms around that a little bit, so I just wanted to share with you today kind of the things that I'm looking at with this. And you can see our various funding sources we're looking at. That revolving loan fund, possibly turn into a grant. Our LCCMR grant is listed up there. We need to have the matching funds for that as well. And then the balances, you know, we're going to have to fund through some other sources, be that a Port Authority bond when we get there. We'll, you know, we're kind of working through this process and bringing it together. And then the various water, sewer, storm, as we typically fund infrastructure. Now, in Fergus Falls, historically, what we've done is when development like that occurs, the city typically has put in those infrastructure improvements, and then we've special assessed, you know, the developer or the owner for their benefiting part of that. Now, there are other metropolitan areas that do planned unit developments, they're called. I'm not very familiar with them, but, you know, Steve had brought that up, that's another option where the developer would put in all the streets, roads, and infrastructure. Just point out in here, that's not what we've experienced in Fergus in the past, but of course, that's in the past, and we'll see what the future brings. But so this is just an update for you today. Again, the first column is the column that we're working on right now. So
Yeah, on the upper part where we're looking at the potential grants and things, we have the LCCMR listed. Am I missing that there is not the $390,000 Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails?
go over to the next column,
that's in the
column
back
number
one.
2.
Yep.
That's at $370,555.
Yep.
So
Good.
that's for that development
That's
of
right,
that trail.
Thank
Yep.
you.
So just an update, certainly no action for you today, but wanted to share kind of what I'm doing. Do you have anything you want to add on that? So.
Thanks, Bill.
Any questions for Bill?
I do have something.
Come on up.
Thanks, Bill, for the update.
You bet.
This is a ways down the road, but at some point, when you asked me the question about the financial projections, I looked at this assuming that it would be done in accordance with the master plan, which shows it as residences on there. I'm not saying it has to be residence, I'm just use that as an example. So at some point, the Port Authority will need to decide what do they want to have on that property, and then they're going to need to deal with the zoning. If you deal with, if you decide that it's going to be multifamily residential, I would strongly encourage that you look at some type of design standards that to go on there. It's going to be a while, but still those are things that you should be considering. And I don't know if you involve the zoning and planning people at this point or at what point you do that, but.
We've certainly had those discussions with
yeah,
our city
okay,
planner.
so-
They're well tuned into the project.
Anyway, those were my comments.
Thank you, Steve. All right, then we'll move on to item number 3, update on the Norgren property.
Right. President, Commissioners, thank you. As we talked about at the last meeting on October 10th, there were some property line issues and descriptions noted with the survey. The survey, we did receive a draft of the survey yesterday, which I've put up on the screen from Interstate, so we haven't had a long time to look at it, but we did get that. The issue with the western boundary of the Jensen property that we spoke of last time still does have a question. They have asked, one note that came up is that there is a drain tile extending over Port Authority land, and that is now described on the survey. So that was a new discovery that we did not have knowledge of, so we've described that. And you can see the
Amy, does it,
dashed- yeah,
is there, how far on Port Authority land does that drain tile go?
it crosses it.
Okay.
There's a slough right in that jog up there that goes to. It's, she had an aerial, but it says it goes across
Gotcha.
it and another.
So it's not, okay.
Yeah, and it's, it's not necessarily an issue, but it is something that was requested by that neighboring property owner, certainly, and we'd want to accurately describe that so that the buyer would know that that was in place. They have also asked to look at if you recall from the October 10th meeting, there was an issue with the description following being connected to an incorrect pin. The pins are placed correctly, but a description was drafted that was incorrect based on those pins. So the property owner has requested if we would consider, the Port Authority would consider shifting that property line or do a property boundary agreement, a new agreement to where that property line would be on the edge of their property. I'm here just, seeking, the city attorney is not here because he is unfortunately attending a funeral today, but authorization for our city attorney to engage in additional conversations with that property owner and negotiate what that property line could look like.
So are they
to
asking
meet.
us to give them property, or are they going to give us property?
It would be shifting approximately 1/3 of an acre to them, but I don't think it's a give. I think it's a negotiation.
Right.
And just so you know, it's a tree line. It's not, we're not giving up any agricultural part. If you look at the map, it's like 15 feet, I think, in from the edge of the field into his woods. And the line was assumed the tree line, but now with the problem with the surveyor, we're not gonna give up any ag land.
Do you think we could, so we could negotiate that?
I don't
Sale, as it
think,
were.
they're open to it, and I've had discussions with them. I said, it's something you just gotta ask for, and it's up to
Do we
them.
just need a motion to that, or is it?
You just let them negotiate it, I think is all it is.
What you're
Come to a
asking?
resolution. Yeah.
I'll make that.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Could you send us out an aerial that maybe, Amy, to everybody so they understand kind of what's going on?
Absolutely. We did
And-
request that from the surveyor, and he's drafting that to show what their request is. I just did not have it this morning.
So we got a motion to let the city attorney engage in conversations with the property owners, and we have a second by Tom.
Tom.
To authorize, I think it's authorizing, you said, right? Not just
Authorize.
engaging, yeah.
Authorize
to engage.
negotiations or authorize the engagement of negotiations, whichever.
Yep. Everybody understand the motion before us? Any other discussion or questions on that? Darren, did you have a question? Okay, hearing none, then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion's carried.
Amy, did they talk about what timeline? And then we try to get this done, so we can get.
Well, we need to get
going.
authorization today, and so.
But I mean, after, we, you know, if we assumed it was gonna be authorized, any
Right, we
idea
would
what a
seek
timeline?
the neighboring property owner to pay for those surveying costs.
Right.
Any costs incurred certainly would be absorbed by that neighboring property making the request. It sounded like it has been looked at by the surveyor, so I would suspect a relatively short timeframe.
Okay, thank you. Because that will hold up our sale until we can even.
Yeah, we have to have a
advertise it, so.
clear description of the property.
Right, okay.
Any other update? Okay. Commissioners, do we have any late business come before us?
Just one final question, Mr. Chair.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a note, and it's not a long one. Bill, you've given us some good figures on this. I'm hearkening back to the dairy property. And I think, I see a 4% city administration fee. Does that include like the staff time that, the various department heads? That's what I think you said, right, on that, on the breakdown, is that?
Yep, that would be basically city engineering.
Engineering
Yeah,
or, staff time, and then the other costs are of 137. Is that any staff time in that, or are those other costs that we've had with consultants?
This is mainly other costs that we've spent to
Yeah.
date on the consultant, the partial appraisal,
Right.
things like that.
And so things go over, like that's a standard you use, right, for projects, the 4%?
The 4% was an estimate, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Braun said build in 4% for city engineering, I believe.
Yeah.
I think is what we were looking at. So it was based off of what Braun would estimate that our engineering staff
Thank
would
you.
do. You bet.
Question. Anything else come before us? If not, meeting adjourned.
I just gotta get a green line.